discussion, so I hope that you will take part. So I want to actually start with Frane now and ask him, I set some examples of what one might associate with the term fake news, but it's also being mixed with disinformation, propaganda, and bad journalism, and these are definitely issues in OSCE region where you are working. So for your office, what is the issue at hand, and what do you mean when you speak about the issue of fake news?
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Barbara. As you mentioned already, I mean, fake news is a new term, but it's not. Is it working? Yeah.
No, you have to
maybe
press.
Closer. Press. So, yes, I can hear myself now. Good morning, and thank you, Barbara, once again. As you mentioned, fake news is a relatively new term, but the activity of promoting fake materials through the media is not particularly new in itself. It's being referred to as lies in the past, and it's also now being referred to not just fake news, but some people have come up with this amazing term called alternative facts as well. And it's come to life, as you mentioned already, during the Brexit campaign, during the last US elections, and it's now the most, let's say, important and most interesting thing how to deal with it. And for us, the perspective is possibly a problematic one in terms of the way some governments are looking to respond to these particular challenges, in terms of that they are now creating new laws to deal with these phenomena of fake news and also propaganda. I think it's important maybe to talk for a minute and to try and distinguish a little bit between fake news and propaganda, even though, I mean, both are essentially based on lies, and in this information, there are clear international standards, international human rights, legal standards, which deal with prohibition of propaganda. Our office has done a lot of work on this particular issue, and we have quite a detailed publication on it. But I think the most important one is that the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights in the Article 20 deals with the prohibition and the ways propaganda should or can be restricted. So does the European Convention on Human Rights in Articles 10 and 17. While fake news is such a vague and broad term, it can be quite easily open to abuse when it comes to trying and limiting. If you try and define fake news, if you ask 10 different people what is fake news, I think you probably will get maybe not 10, but at least 7 or 8 different responses. And that lies to the root of the problem when you try to use laws to limit such a spread of fake news. It is quite a challenge to try and deal with it, and this is why the 4 special rapporteurs on freedom of expression this year decided to dedicate a joint declaration which is issued every year by the UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Expression and Opinion, David Kay, the Organization of American States Special Rapporteur Edison Lanza, and the African Human Rights Commission Special Rapporteur on Human Rights, Pansy Tlakula. They decided this year to issue a special joint declaration on recommendations, giving recommendations to the governments and to the various authorities, but also to the media and online internet intermediaries, how they see ways of dealing with this issue, and at the same time protecting human rights. And of course, needless to mention, this was done very closely in together with Article 19 and the Center for Law and Democracy, 2 important NGOs in this field. I have a few copies of the joint declaration here, and I'll talk a little bit more about
we will speak about what the joint declaration proposes as a solution in a minute, but now I wanted to go to Iman, because the term fake news has been obviously coined, as we mentioned several times, by Donald Trump and the Western media, but the issue of lies and misinformation is definitely not limited to Western media. And so I wanted to ask you, from your perspective, what has been the issue of fake or fake news in this region and in Indonesia specifically?
Ya, di Indonesia, fake news dimaknai sebagai sebuah informasi bohong, informasi yang apakah itu dari awal memang difabrikasi atau memang sengaja dipelintir, yang kemudian disebarluaskan melalui berbagai kanal-kanal informasi. Dan saya pribadi cenderung melihat fake news ini, saya lebih banyak mengacu bahwa memang fake news itu rentangnya sangat lebar. Dari mulai sekedar satir sampai isu yang difabrikasi. Dan dalam konteks seperti ini sesungguhnya Indonesia sekarang berada dalam tahap yang sangat serius. Bahkan sekarang kalau kita lihat perkembangannya, yang bicara soal fake news bukan lagi kalangan media atau masyarakat, tetapi juga sampai kemudian Presiden pun dalam berbagai kesempatan selalu menyinggung soal fake news ini. Pada awalnya sebenarnya fake news ini kita melihat adalah soal kompetisi kebenaran yang kemudian tersaji di platform media sosial versus media mainstream. Awalnya hanya begitu, sehingga kemudian orang masih percaya bahwa untuk mencari kebenaran tentang apakah itu fake news atau bukan bisa melalui media mainstream. Tetapi kemudian fake news ini menemukan dimensi lain pada saat kita memasuki kontestasi politik. Sebagaimana kita ketahui, Indonesia memiliki wilayah yang sangat besar, ada 34 provinsi, ada 514 daerah tingkat 2, dan itu mereka secara bertahap melakukan pemilu, election, local election. Dan pada saat terjadi local election, maka kemudian fake news ini menemukan dimensi baru, dimensi politik yang kemudian membuat dia berkembang dan tumbuh dan berbiak dengan sangat cepat. Dan ini kemudian menjadi sebuah hal yang ancaman yang akan terus-menerus bagi kita, karena tahun ini saja kita melakukan 101 pemilu lokal, 7 diantaranya level provinsial, dan sisanya adalah level distrik. Kemudian tahun depan, tahun 2018 akan ada 171 pemilu lokal, dan kemudian berikutnya tahun 2019 akan ada pemilu presiden dan juga pemilu parlemen. Ini akan membuat kemudian kita dari tahun ke tahun akan berhadapan dengan persoalan fake news. Dan kemudian ini menjadi persoalan besar pada saat kemudian fake news ini terkait dengan isu-isu bukan hanya sekedar isu politik ansih, tetapi kemudian digali sampai kemudian dilekatkan dengan isu-isu yang lain, termasuk isu sentimen agama, ras, dan sebagainya. Ini menjadi hal yang sangat serius sekarang. Nah, kemudian perkembangan selanjutnya adalah bahwa fake news ini bukan hanya mendapatkan konteksnya dalam soal politik lagi, tetapi kemudian sudah mulai mengancam eksistensi pers sebagai pilar keempat demokrasi. Karena kemudian kita banyak menemukan bahwa fake news yang awalnya hanya berkembang di media sosial, kemudian diadop begitu saja masuk media mainstream tanpa proses verifikasi, yang kemudian memunculkan anggapan di kalangan masyarakat bahwa media pun sudah tidak dipercaya lagi. Ya. Jadi ini yang membuat kemudian terjadi delegitimasi fungsi media, yang awalnya media itu bisa menjadi sebuah alternatif untuk mencari kebenaran tentang fake news, tapi kemudian sebagian media justru berpartisipasi dalam menyebarkan fake news, sehingga kemudian terjadi delegitimasi media.
It was mentioned already several times that actually the period of election is when the lies come to the spotlight, and politicians are probably the ones to blame. So probably we are not rightly placed here to discuss this in relation to the journalists. So we should probably speak about how to stop fake news from the political parties. But also it has been, I think, clearly established, not only from what I said at the beginning, but also what Frane and Iman said, that the beauty is in the eyes of beholder when it comes to the definition of fake news, and it can be anything. and it's not new. But what comes new is that the social media and how this spreads out on the social media, and Facebook has been on the receiving end of the criticism in terms of how to deal with lies on Facebook. So I wanted to ask Onye, why is this priority for Facebook, and what do you do when you deal with the issue of fake news?
Great. Thank you so much for the opportunity to appear on this panel and to talk to all of you today. My name is Anya Kerr. I represent Facebook and our journalism partnerships all around the world. Up until a year ago, I was managing editor of Storyful. It's a social media news agency. Hopefully some of you have heard of it. I spent 5 years. I thinking a lot about this topic today, like primarily as a social media news agency. What we were trying to do day in, day out was verify what was real and trustworthy and debunk the content that was fake and untrustworthy. And before that, I spent about 7 years as a current affairs reporter and a political correspondent in the Irish Parliament. So you can probably spot the Irish accent and raise your hands at any point if I do go off on a little tangent with this Irish accent. But I basically come from traditional journalism, went into new media with Storyful, and now find myself in Facebook for the last year, and in a company that takes this issue incredibly seriously and take our responsibilities very seriously. And you need only look back at Mark Zuckerberg's community letter, all 6,000 words of it in recent weeks, to really understand our commitment to tackling this issue. Hopefully some of you have seen and learned about our Facebook journalism project, which also makes clear our commitment to tackling the issue of false news. And basically, to be really blunt about this from the very start of this 90-minute conversation, we in Facebook do not want to see false news on our platform. That's unequivocal on our part. We know our users do not want to see false news on our platform. We consider it to be hurtful, damaging, misleading. It ultimately erodes trust. And already today, we've heard that word about the relationship between journalists and the audience, the users and the public. We also care deeply about trust on our platform. So false news ultimately erodes that, and we consider ourselves to have a huge responsibility in how people use our platform every day, and a responsibility to think about how, our core mission in Facebook is how do we build an open and connected world. And critical within that you will hopefully have seen Mark Zuckerberg talk about a lot, is the idea of informed communities. So false news ultimately runs counter to the core mission of what we are trying to do in Facebook. And so a couple of things that I just want to point out that we're doing, and happy to go into them in more detail over the next 90 minutes. But in Facebook, we're obviously trying to figure out day to day what are the things we can do on our platform to reduce the amount of false news. So there's a number of things we're doing. But we also recognize that false news is also a symptom of a wider societal issue. And those solutions are going to require cross-industry collaboration with people like you, journalists, educators, academics, researchers, people who think about false news, news literacy, trust, informed communities day in, day out. But there's 4 things that hopefully we'll be able to touch on today that we're working really hard on. And the first, when it comes to false news, is disrupting the economics, the financial incentives around it. What we've learned in Facebook is that a lot of false news is financially motivated. So we've been working really hard to disrupt that link between these spoof domains, these spammy websites, and the traffic that comes over to Facebook. So cutting off those ties and ensuring that you cannot monetize that type of content on Facebook. Secondly, we've been building products to ensure that there's less false news being shared on the platform. Thirdly, helping our community be more discerning. What's fake, what's real, what should I trust, what should I not trust? So thinking about news literacy skills, how we can encourage people to be their own arbiters of truth. And the fourth thing is ultimately working with the industry to find industry-wide solutions. And we just announced in recent weeks the launch of the News Integrity Initiative, which is a collaboration with platforms and publishers, universities, third-party organizations all over the world. It has seed funding of 14 million US dollars to basically help innovate and problem solve around this issue. So that's just kind of high level where we're coming from in Facebook when it comes to false news, and we'll be happy to take your questions over the next 90 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you do not want to have false information on your platform, but I think that's quite clear from the definition. That's really difficult to determine what is the truth and what is false. And also, I like the idea that you find false news something which is disruptive to economics, so maybe we can start banning advertisement, because that's basically false news in majority of the cases, as I see it.
That's propaganda.
Or propaganda, yeah, advertisement.
Yes.
But obviously, journalists are often called into account when we are talking about, I mean, what is false and what is not, and truth. And actually, I don't like this idea that journalism is telling the truth to the public, because truth is a messianic job. Yeah. It's not the job of the media. The media are selling the news. But anyhow, going back to the topic, I wanted to ask Sophie, because you work for a free speech organization that protects journalists. So from your experience, is this hysteria about false news something which is trying to improve journalism, or is it something which the governments are using and abusing to crack on the media freedom and control the public debate? So what's your perspective?
Thank you. I think first, just to say that I agree with what was said before, that there is no clear definition of fake news. We don't know what is it, and that's why when you have to look at the reaction of governments, their responses to fake news can depend on the definition they give actually about fake news. And one thing that is very important is to always have in mind that the issue of fake news must really be approached with caution. And this approach must be proportionate and to protect freedom of expression and freedom of the press. Why? Because we know that you have a lot of countries where you have predators of press freedom that use the term and the concept of fake news to muzzle the media. And many of them have taken recent statements of Donald Trump as means of justifying their repressive policies. So, for instance, we have now the Russian telecoms regulator, which is preparing a draft decree purely and simply to block all content that contains false information. We also have example, for instance, in Africa, because we know information control is key for those political leaders to impose their own version of events. So, for instance, the South African government plans to impose a system of online control of the media in order to meet the challenge of fake news. And we see a growing hostility to the media from the government, probably because there is a crisis in President Jacob Zuma's African National Congress, whose leader tends increasingly to silence dissident voices. In Burundi, this is also an issue. The concept of fake news is also used to muzzle the media. In Egypt, journalists are frequently accused of disseminating false information whenever they criticize the government or when they want to report on sensitive issues. And this comes to leads to a self-censorship among many Egyptian journalists in their coverage of events, because they are feared to join the long list of Egyptian journalists already imprisoned. In Bahrain, we also have, for instance, the prominent citizen journalist and human rights campaigner Nabil Rajab, who was accused last December of publishing false news about the killing of Bahrain. He could face up to 2 years imprisonment on this latest charge, which arises from interviews he gave in 2014 and 2015 to local and regional TV stations about the situation on human rights in Bahrain. So we see that many countries and many predators of the press are using this concept actually to really silence the media and the journalists. And what is also a trend, and which is really a case of concern, I think, is the temptation by Western countries to regulate also this concept. We see now in Germany there is a draft law aiming to force social media companies to delete violating content from their platforms. You have the Italian parliament that there is a bill to criminalize the posting or sharing of false fake news, and that could be sentenced by imprisonment. And even in France, there was a draft bill on fake news, but the senator has to withdraw the draft when they see the outcry of the civil societies.
So Sophie showed that actually quite numerous examples of how this term is being used to repress media and stifle critical voices to the government. And I have been quite disparaging about this term. You gathered that so far, but I don't want to deny that the misinformation exists and is a serious problem and actually can lead to serious consequences and even to genocide. If we look at examples like Rwanda or former Yugoslavia. So it's really a serious problem. And then the governments are trying to repress it. So now what to do with it? And how do we address this from a legal and policy perspective? And I want to go back to Frane and ask does the international law, and you mentioned that, already provide a solution to this issue? And is it possible to regulate it in some sort of human rights and freedom of expression compliant way? And if so, how? And also, maybe you can touch upon how the special rapporteurs approach the issue.
Thank you. As I've already mentioned, it's the focus of this year's joint declarations by the 4 special rapporteurs, so the experts in the field of freedom of expression. And the recommendation they give essentially, as I said already, are going to governments, but also to the media themselves and to the social media platforms. And first of all, the clear recommendation, and it's kind of obvious, is that governments and political leaders should not generate themselves false news, should not be the source of it. They should be instead factual, trustworthy sources, as an example of good governance and good behavior. And then at the same time, they should refrain from providing general bans on fake news or non-objective information. As Sophie already mentioned, you can see very good and clear examples why this is hugely problematic, and there are many other examples where voices who are in opposition are immediately being accused of being fake news, and such the term is being used to stifle their freedom of expression. What they should do positively is to promote media freedom and media diversity, so that people have a wide range of sources from which they can draw their news from. Governments should also support projects on media literacy and promote digital literacy of the general public through education and awareness. For those of us who spent some time or have grown up in some kind of totalitarian regimes, that kind of comes as an obvious. I mean, we all knew from early childhood that whatever we saw on television or read in the newspaper was probably some kind of disinformation, if I wanted to be polite. So some people, I think, but in general, that would go a long way to helping people understand that you should take a very cynical and skeptical approach to every source of information and check and find alternative sources. So in that respect, government should provide an environment for freedom of expression to flourish. And another important point is that a role of public service media in this context is very important. This is more of, let's say, a European context, but public service media should be independent, factual, and provide good examples and set good standards of journalism. And government should provide the public service media with independence and freedom to be able to do this. And another important element is that government should ensure that there are civil defamation laws as a way to counter disinformation about people, because one of the things that we often hear is, well, we need strong legislation in order to protect people's reputation is being damaged through fake news. Yes, but this should be done primarily through civil defamation laws, which are quite clearly defined, and not criminal defamation, which exists, unfortunately, still in many countries and is being used. Again, I mean, we heard in terms of responses by internet intermediaries in terms of creating editors, algorithm, or flagging fake news. I think it can be very positive that people are looking at this issue, and of course I think we welcome very much the inclusion of the non-governmental sector of journalists in this issue. But it becomes problematic again in terms of definition. Who is who is defining what is going to be taken off a particular platform, what is going to be removed, under which standards, under which legislation. If you look at legislative standards in many countries, there is a wide variety of what is permitted and what is not. And of course, that is in what is allowed in one country may be completely problematic in another country. So this should be done in such a way to strengthen international standards on free media and freedom of expression. And then the role of the media themselves is quite important in this role. I think Barbara at the beginning sort of gave a very good example of what is the difference between fake news in a way and journalism by providing a correction to her own fake news. I would only say as a comment that she should have done it much more quickly rather than wait a whole year to let us know that this publication was being delayed.
It was UNESCO's publication,
yes.
not mine.
So a little bit of a humor and joke aside, but essentially the media, through providing a platform where they allow for corrections, are showing that this is not about fake news. People do make mistakes, and there is a very big difference to correcting facts of a story or making sure that different views are represented, to knowingly promoting fake news and disinformation and propaganda. So the media should strengthen self-regulation and support such initiatives to ensure accuracy of the news and provide right to reply. And this is again something that the authorities and the governments can have an important role to provide an enabling environment, not to create self-regulation for them, because that's not self-regulation. Self-regulation means it's done by the media themselves, but media this is the way they can support and fight against this phenomena.
Okay. So the joint declaration is actually a piece of literature which I would encourage all of you to read it, because whenever people ask like what to do with fake news, I always refer them to this joint declaration, so that will resolve all our problems and highlights all the issues and the responses. So and a copy is over there, but it's
I only
also
have 20 copies.
Oh, okay, well it's more than that, but
it's
on
available
the website.
on the website.
Mm-hmm, yeah. So and as we said before, and Frane mentioned, the social media have been on the receiving end of this problem, and the special rapporteurs also recommend to the social media and intermediaries in general certain steps how to deal with this issue. So I want to go back to Anya and ask what's your take on this, and also whether you think that you are really, as a social media giant, whether you are really best placed legally and also institutionally to decide what information is true and false, and understand the problem and address it through technology, but also touch on this issue that the social media business model is based on advertising model which preferentiates certain types of news and makes the news visible and findable, and how you deal with it from a technology perspective and how you are addressing this problem.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, so I guess stepping back for a moment, the Facebook platform is a place with almost 2 billion users today, which is a phenomenal community where people are sharing stories, videos, links, text day to day, sharing opinions, images, and it's just this incredibly vibrant, dynamic community. And what lives behind newsfeed every day are basically a system of values that Facebook has thought very deeply and meaningfully about. And the first and foremost is that Facebook is a place where you come to engage with your friends and family, first and foremost. But the second thing that we always note in our values that sit behind the newsfeed on Facebook is that the newsfeed, the Facebook community, should be a place also that you come, to be informed, that you have informed conversations, that you are exposed to informative content. And so with that core vision that I mentioned earlier of this idea of building informed communities on Facebook, we need a strong news industry. We need quality content. We need strong, authoritative, trustworthy journalism, which is what many of you here today offer day in, day out. And so what we're all the time thinking about is, in order to build that informed, civically engaged community, we need to work with the news industry as a partnership, and hence the Facebook journalism project that I mentioned earlier. And under all of these initiatives, when we talk about what does it mean to have trustworthy content, what does it mean to elevate the good actors and the quality content, it has to be a really holistic approach. It's not enough just to say we're going to work with third-party organizations as we do in the United States to dispute content. It has to be more holistic, where we think about sensationalist content, clickbait, spam, and all of these other things. So to talk you through, just to give you an idea of some of the things that we're thinking and testing at the moment when we talk about creating products to reduce the amount of false news content that's on the platform. So first and foremost, one of the interesting tests that we've been doing in the United States, and I myself am based in New York, is around empowering the community themselves. If any of you go into your news feed today, you'll see a little right-hand grey arrow, and you can drop that down on a piece of content, and you can say, I think this is spam, I think this is false news. You're kind of asked, you know, what makes you uncomfortable about this piece of content? So all of you can do that, and that brings it to our teams around the world 24/7 to look at. But in the US, we're doing a test at the moment that when somebody flags that they think that this is a piece of false news content, what is happening at that point is that it's being filtered across to a Facebook team of researchers who are doing some initial work to see, is this a potential spoof domain, somebody purporting to be a reputable, trustworthy publisher versus a personal post. Where they think maybe it's this spoof domain, a spammy website, somebody who maybe has not got good intentions, potentially a bad actor, it's going across to 5 fact-checking organizations in the United States who are then going through their own rigorous protocols and principles. They're doing journalism to decide, is this the worst of the worst hoax, false news content? If 2 or more of them decide, yes, it is, a flag goes on it that this has been disputed by third-party fact-checking organizations. And the AP, Snopes, PolitiFact, these organizations can attach an article giving the factual position. What happens under this test in the United States is that that content can then be downranked, and you cannot monetize it. You cannot run ads on it. So that's one test that we're running in the United States to try and understand, would this work in other markets? Is this something that's scalable? But the other things that we're thinking about that are scalable, apart from that community empowerment, is also thinking about what does it mean to do informed sharing. And we've done a lot of research to try and understand, when a lot of people click into an article and they don't share it, and you know, fewer people are actually sharing something that they read, what is that saying to us in Facebook and to those who think about the newsfeed? And so all the time we're interpreting those signals and interpreting, is that because it was clickbait? You know, it was sensationalist, it was, you know, all capitals, trying to get people to hook in on a headline, but the headline didn't match the content. So we're all the time looking for those signals, and where it's clickbait, where it's spam, where it's sensationalism, you know, that potentially is going to be downranked in newsfeed. And again, we're going to try and make sure we're elevating the good actors. So all the time looking for signals like that. The other thing that we're all the time thinking about is that under false news, this is a complex issue. It requires holistic thinking on our part, is the idea of, rather than just when somebody clicks in and reads a story and maybe it confirms their own bias, it confirms maybe their own political viewpoint, the instinctive thing all of us might sometimes think about is, well, let's serve up somebody an alternative opinion, an alternative story to that. What our research has shown us in Facebook is that simply serving up one alternative viewpoint will actually make many people just more entrenched. They'll actually be more orientated to their original belief. And so what we're thinking a lot about in Facebook is the idea of a complete picture. How do we offer the community a more complete picture? And that means thinking about more perspectives and more related articles. And we're doing a lot of testing at the moment with that concept, that with some of the big issues of the day, before you even click in to read that article, you're seeing some suggested articles underneath. In France at the moment, we have a really interesting test with the elections there, that you're seeing a range of perspectives around where all of the candidates stand on particular issues. So my point being with this, that false news is one thing that we're tackling, but this has to be more holistic around polarization and sensationalism, spam content, etc., to make sure that we're really thinking about the feed quality and the quality of content that our community are seeing. And one last thing I just want to mention is that all of us probably think a lot about the supply of journalism, the supply of content. What we're really trying to think about as well, in parallel to all of these efforts around, as I mentioned, disrupting the financial incentives, building products, helping our community, it's to think about the demand for journalism, the demand for that content. And that's where, to your earlier point, Barbara, Facebook does not want to be the arbiters of truth here. And I imagine many of you in the audience would agree with that statement. That is why we have to think about collaborative opportunities with the industry, working with third-party fact-checking organisations, empowering the community. And to that point about demand, that's where news literacy is a core concept that we're giving a lot of thought to. Locally, here in Indonesia, we've been across 7 cities, into schools, understanding what education initiatives look like. We've been running at the top of newsfeed in recent weeks here in Indonesia and across the world, 10 tips and tricks for people to come in and think about what does it mean to be an informed sharer on Facebook. And we're giving people the skills and tools and expertise that they need to be able to debunk and verify content, decide what's trustworthy and what isn't. But we're doing that with experts in the field, like many of you here, and it's a collaboration that we're looking forward to really progressing in weeks and months to come.
Yeah. So thank you very much. And you mentioned the collaborative approach and need to involve various stakeholders. So obviously the media councils and media industry is an important stakeholder here. And you also mentioned sensationalism, which mainstream media or tabloid media are often part of a problem. So I wanted to now ask Iman, as what you as a media industry are doing, and especially from the Press Council perspective, what steps you are taking to address these concerns, and also whether the Press Councils actually, in the age of digital media, have any relevance in the debate, and if so, what?
Ya, pertama saya ingin katakan bahwa Dewan Pers dan juga masyarakat pers di Indonesia dalam posisi tidak ingin membuat peraturan baru mengenai fake news ini. Dengan dasar pikiran bahwa fake news ini bisa disikapi dengan oleh masyarakat pers dan juga masyarakat dengan tetap berpegang pada aturan-aturan yang ada. Tadi sudah disampaikan bagaimana dengan melindungi kehormatan individu yang dirugikan oleh fake news. Di Indonesia sudah ada beberapa undang-undang yang sudah melindungi itu, termasuk juga undang-undang mengenai informasi dan transaksi elektronik. Dan itu sudah cukup menjamin adanya perlindungan terhadap hak individu dari serangan fake news. Nah, kita harus melihat bagaimana Dewan Pers dan juga kita masyarakat pers menyikapi ini, atau kemudian memproyeksi bagaimana menghadapi gelombang fake news ini. Dasarnya adalah kita harus melihat aktor-aktornya. Jadi kita yang perlu kita lakukan, saya setuju tadi disampaikan bahwa salah satu hal yang penting adalah melakukan digital literasi, media literasi, itu yang memang selalu kita lakukan. Dan saya bergembira tadi Facebook mengatakan bahwa mereka punya concern besar dalam soal ini, dan kami Indonesia sebagai 5 besar pengguna Facebook di dunia, dan kalau ada Perserikatan Bangsa-Bangsa Facebook kami itu memiliki hak veto, maka kami benar-benar sangat berharap bahwa kemudian Facebook itu berpartisipasi betul dalam soal digital literasi, apalagi kalau kemudian media literasi di Indonesia. Terima kasih nanti kalau seandainya. Yang kedua adalah bahwa kita juga dalam konteks bagaimana media berperan dalam fake news, memerangi fake news itu, sekarang secara di luar kerja-kerja jurnalistik, masyarakat media sudah membuat jaringan-jaringan anti-hoax. Jadi mereka bekerja sama dengan inisiatif dari masyarakat sipil, bagaimana mereka membentuk jaringan untuk terus menganalisis adanya informasi yang dicurigai sebagai hoax. Di Indonesia ada turnback hoax, itu turnbackhoax.com. Kemudian kita juga ada bukan hoax. Kemudian juga ada jaringan-jaringan dari wartawan yang secara voluntary untuk selalu menginformasikan adanya hoax yang beredar di masyarakat. Nah, yang lain adalah kita melihat bahwa kebebasan bermedia di Indonesia itu juga diikuti dengan adanya penyimpangan-penyimpangan yang muncul dari media-media yang gagap untuk melakukan praktik bermedia. Mereka tidak mampu, pada dasarnya sebenarnya mereka tidak mampu untuk mendapatkan operasi, pendapatan dari operasi mereka. Maka yang terjadi adalah mereka melakukan fabrikasi hoax. Dan ini kita juga melihat bahwa hal serupa juga sudah menjalar ke media-media mainstream. Karena mereka melihat bahwa dari 120 triliun iklan yang ada sekarang, dari iklan digital itu hanya 10% yang masuk ke media mainstream digital. Artinya bahwa untuk bertahan hidup kemudian sebagian dari media itu mengejar clickbait. Artinya kemudian mereka tanpa sadar itu mereka juga memproduksi hoax untuk sekedar menaikkan kepemirsaan atau klik mereka. Ini menjadi problem besar. Oleh sebab itu sejak beberapa tahun terakhir Dewan Pers membuat pelatihan-pelatihan yang tujuannya mendorong media untuk memikirkan ulang model bisnis yang selama ini mereka jalankan. Jadi kalau tadi Facebook mulai menawarkan monetisasi dan sebagainya, itu mungkin bagian dari solusi ini. Karena sesungguhnya dengan adanya sekian sempitnya peluang untuk mendapatkan iklan, jangan sampai yang terjadi kemudian pemerkosaan terhadap jurnalisme hanya untuk menyelamatkan perusahaan pers. Ini menjadi persoalan penting sekarang. Jadi kami sangat berharap adanya inisiatif dan juga gagasan-gagasan yang memungkinkan kita untuk memikirkan ulang tentang bisnis model, tentang bagaimana kita mengenerate revenue stream baru di luar iklan display dan sebagainya. Itu akan bisa menyelamatkan bisnis media dan juga menyelamatkan jurnalisme as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this interesting comments and examples of what the press councils are doing. And another important stakeholder in this debate that was mentioned several times are NGOs or civil society. So before opening the floor to questions, I wanted to ask Sophie, what sort of activities are NGOs, especially those that are working on press freedom, doing to address the problem at hand, and what can the civil society do to contribute to finding solutions?
Thank you. I think it's very important first to remind that all this fake news debate really harm civil society and journalism, and that the threat posed by fake news doesn't emerge because of journalism, as some leaders, political leaders such as Mr. Trump, Mr. Erdogan, Putin tries to attack independent journalism. And then if we have this debate, it's why? Because you have first war of information, you have also an economic model of social platform that is driven by an algorithm that is driven more by the click than by the quality of the content. So you have all this context. And in the past few months, we have witnessed the booming creation of initiatives aiming at checking mainly the information in order to counter fake news. And what we see is that there is no very long list of sometimes overlapping and interconnecting initiatives of which the scope is very difficult to get. There are platforms, not-profit organizations, university-based initiatives, consortium of professional journalists. And the question we can ask ourselves today is how to deal with all those projects, how to know which of them detain the truth, or which one is the more accurate than the others. And we are supposed that other projects are to come. And just in a few words, because I won't tell about all the initiatives because there are so many, but we have, of course, fact-checking initiative, which is not new. We saw it already in 2008, for instance, for the presidential election in the USA with the PolitiFact project. You could have many examples, for instance, in Ukraine. In Ukraine, you have, for instance, a fact-checking platform from civil society that is called Stop Fake, that was created in 2014 to fight against the propaganda by the Russian government. You have many initiatives that were made at the beginning by the university programs, by journalist consortium or not-profit organizations such as Corrective in Germany, which is the first non-profit newsroom dedicated to fact-checking. You have Africa Checked. The EU also is trying to play its part, so they funded a project, the FAME project. Some European university gathered to develop an algorithm which would be able to automatically verify an information and grade it, which can be doubtful, but let's see. But I think what is new is also that the internet platform, as we saw with Facebook, is entered the game. And they did, now you have many association, collaborative approach. I think it's an asset sometimes for the newsroom and the fact-checking organization because it makes it easier for them to hunt the fake news. It also allows this giant tech platform to clean up their public image by showing their will to change. And so you have all this initiative we already talked about, the International Fact-Checking Network, the First Draft News. You also have the founders of Wikipedia that just announced a few days ago that they're going to raise funds to publish articles which will be double-checked by professional journalists and volunteers. And on top of this fact-checking initiative, you have all what is developed about media literacy. And so fact-checking is very often accompanied with tools and books for the media consumer. We talked already about that. And all this effort, I think, we have to welcome. And it's always easier to criticize than to act. So I think it's very important, I think, to have all these stakeholders to get to meet and to really think about what has to be done. But it is actually very difficult to find the right solution. And for instance, when you think about fact-checking, now what we see, it's also war information, war of fact-checking. You have Russian Today at its own fact-checking website. Now we have the extreme right party Front National in France develop its truth cell. So we also see that fact-checking is time-consuming. You also have the problem of the filter bubble, where people who want to check fact websites are the ones who believe in fact-checking. And at the end, what we can say also is that the validation of information is the integral part of journalism. You don't have journalism if you don't fact check. And we have to be careful that all these fact-checking initiatives don't devaluate and don't disintegrate the journalism further. So this is a really tricky issue. I think we don't have the whole solution. I think that the holistic approach is the approach we have to have. We have to be very careful not to promote self-regulation and not to promote privatization of censorship. We need to encourage media literacy, but we also need the giant tech platform to go beyond, because what is a problem also is the lack of verifiability and context of the source of information of tech platforms. We also have the lack of transparency of algorithms and how they work to create feeds. The user should know how the political parties and other interest groups spend on advertising on particular technology platforms. So I think there are many ways to really improve the way people get access to information and know the context of information.
Thank you so much. I was not aware that we actually need to start fact-checking on fact-checkers. So that's another project probably somebody can start. But thank you so much for all these interesting presentations and contributions. So I now want to open the floor to questions, and I would like to ask you to be brief and to actually ask a question instead of making a speech, because I will stop you if you do so. So let's start here. I will take a few questions. So you, then Rohan, and then gentleman at the back. And you actually need to go to the mic. No, it's not working? Yeah, it's working. Yeah. Oh, Mike.
If you can take it.
Yeah, take it, please.
Check.
Yes.
My name is Viramala Anjaya. I am from the Jakarta Post newspaper. today we are discussing about the fake news. When I was studying in the school, my teachers used to tell me 100 lies cannot make a truth. But now we have to see there is a new trend thanks to this internet revolution. Now many people are trying to make a fake news as a true news by employing cyber force. They are employing people to write comments favorably. This is really good. Even governments are also involving, even the political parties, even in the recent Indonesian elections also, this is a new trend. They have, every political party, every political leader, they have a cyber force to boost their image. So this is a very bad trend. But for this fake news, I have a suggestion.
Yeah. Okay, can you ask the question?
Yeah. I have a suggestion, not a question. I have a suggestion. Like we have a Transparency International, we have a Amnesty International. So like that, I think there is a need for a new organization which has to announce every year which are the major news media websites which publishes fake news. So to name them and to shame them. Every country, maybe in this, we can invite the governments also to participate in this endeavor. All the press organizations, they can have this mechanism. So every year, we have to check a body and announce which are the media organizations.
Yes, so that's really interesting solution.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
so
thank
you
you
for your contribution.
Yeah,
so the gentleman behind you, and then Rohan.
I'm just going to put his comments into a suggestion, because the presentation seems to be focusing on what we see on our screens, on our feeds. And that's only the symptom of the problem. Much of the problem is going on behind the scenes. As he has said, politicians, different actors have gamed the Facebook algorithm and system of likes to make it the mess it is now. So the question is, what can you propose to be done on this end to address that problem of gaming the system? Like, for example, there's this controversy in Cambodia between the top politicians of the land about the 3 million likes of the prime minister, and it was found that some 20% only came from Cambodia. The rest came from Philippines, from India, from Ukraine. So that's an industry in itself. What can be done about that?
Thank you. Rohan, and then I take the questions here.
Hi, this one's for Anya. You may have seen that tech meme graph, or several graphs, which showed the way that the top 20 stories about the American elections from mainstream media declined and were overtaken by fake news stories in the run-up to the American election. So basically, there was more engagements with fake news than, if you like, real news, and that link, according to TechMean, anyway, looking at the figures, seemed to be directly related to the change in the algorithm, which put Friends First ahead of traditional publishers. And if you are committed to Friends First, where is the space for traditional publishers and new publishers? And slightly further to that, you have a system of instant articles, which I know is not going down necessarily very well with the larger publishers, but does open up a great deal of opportunity for smaller publishers who have professional records, but not the scale or the influence of the Washington Post or the Guardian. And perhaps you could talk a little bit about the work that Facebook is doing with smaller publishers.
Okay, thank you. So here was the hand here, Errol, and then there, lady there, and then we open.
Hello?
Yes.
Can I? May I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Errol Enderoğlu from Reporter Without Border Turkey. Thank you very much for all these valuable contributions. My question goes to Ayn once again. In Turkey there is an impression among the public that is Facebook is one of the platform the most cooperating with Turkish government in terms of regulating or interfering to social media accounts? And what do you know the challenges facing by Facebook, especially on Turkey, or whether there are some countries like Turkey where there is a specific challenges that you face in terms of fight against fake news content or for other reasons? Thank you.
Okay, so let's go and take those questions. In terms of first question was about to panel in general, what we can do with troll armies and politicians hijacking the system. So I don't know who wants to respond to that. And then there were two questions to Onye about what Facebook is doing to help small publishers and in authoritarian countries. Do you want to take the troll one?
Okay. Essentially, and politicians and troll armies, I think one key element is that politicians need to show some accountability in terms of them, I've already said, not being the source of misinformation. So I think they should be hammered by the public if they are being seen as a source of information. And but for that you need a public that also understands what is being said in terms of fake news. So we come back to the education. I think also the troll armies, there are some of course technical means to differentiate between somebody who is posting genuinely and somebody who is posting across wide variety of platforms at the same time using, I don't know, very sophisticated software, and that's of course not freedom. That doesn't fall under freedom of expression when you are engaged in that kind of activity. So, in addition to technical means, I think again I come back to the issue that people should be a little bit more understanding and critical of what they are consuming when it comes to news and current affairs. I mean, when we read stories which are sort of titillating and interesting, that's one thing, but when we are trying to educate ourselves about the world that we live in, I think we also need some personal responsibility about what we are consuming and double check even more reputable news items. I think it's good to have a couple of different sources when it comes, and that goes back to my sort of first vocation, which was journalism, and one of the first things that I was taught is how to get more sources and how to see when maybe the same article that appears in a number of different outlets is actually running back to the same source. So those are, I would say, are the key elements here.
So you advocate for helpful distrust to everything, and people from our regions are actually very good in that, because we grew up under the systems where you were not supposed to trust and believe anything unless it is officially denied. So now I want to go to Onye, whether you can answer those two questions.
Yeah, I'll pick up on that question of political trolling, etc. First and foremost, the thing to say is that we want to ensure that we get the balance right of providing for freedom of expression on this incredibly huge and vibrant community, but critically keeping our community safe, and for this to be a place that people feel they can come and have safe and informed and engaged conversations. So that's the critical balance that we're always trying to strike. With issues that you talked about with political trolling, we know that there are some bad actors. We know that there are some who misuse the platform and are trying to manipulate a civil discourse. And we have gotten much more sophisticated in how we think about security on our platform, from just traditional work around thinking about hacking and malware and spam, to now really thinking about the bad actors and who are trying to manipulate a conversation, who are trying to deceive people. And we're giving a lot of thought to that day to day. And the ways in which we approach this are ultimately three-pronged, and we have teams all over the world who are just dedicated to thinking about safety on our platform, to thinking about political trolling and all of these critical issues. And the way their work breaks down is into ultimately policies, programs, and products. And so the first thing to say under policies is that we have community standards. What I mean by that, to tease it out, is that Facebook is a new platform. With that comes new responsibilities, and we have to take responsibility for how people use our platform day to day, and that is ultimately governed by our community standards. So we have our own rules that apply to how users engage around hate speech and bullying and harassment and credible threats and things like that. So, you know, day to day we are managing our community according to those community standards. The other thing to say around products then is that we work very hard to this particular question of political trolling to identify as early as possible and remove fake accounts, because the cornerstone of Facebook compared to maybe other platforms is that it's the authenticity. You have to be a verifiable human being to operate successfully on Facebook. So we work very hard and we're all the time learning and iterating on how to identify and remove those fake accounts. And we're getting much better at recognizing particular behaviors around, you know, accounts maybe that post, you know, the same post over and over, or, you know, have a lot of spam messages going out. So we're getting better at detecting those accounts and ultimately closing them down. And the other thing to say then is around programs and security, and making sure that we are working with people in the industry around research in this area, that we're doing outreach and education so that journalists understand what it means to protect their privacy, to be secure on a platform like this, and not have their own accounts manipulated for deceptive purposes. So, you know, on this particular question, I would just say we take it very, very seriously and are day-to-day, 24 hours a day, working across the world to make sure this is a safe and responsible place for people to communicate day in, day out. On small publishers, thank you. So, thank you for that question. So, first pillar of Facebook Journalism Project, the question was about how are we working with small publishers, and often I think of local publishers, and I myself as a journalist started out, that's where, you know, I learned the bread and butter of journalism was with a local newspaper. And so particularly under that first pillar, we are going out into local newsrooms. Some of you may have heard of the Knight Foundation, particularly in the US, to really understand what are the products and tools and services that local small newsrooms need that are ultimately different to a New York Times or a CNN or a Jakarta Post, and really understand those various different tension points. And so we're working really hard to do that. We've held a series of hackathons in recent weeks. We've been doing roundtables and workshops and work streams. And the Facebook Journalism Project team, we're going to be on the ground here increasingly in this market, doing that learning exercise from local publishers to really understand what can we do to be a better partner. And that ultimately means what are the products that we can build, what are the monetization strategies we need to think about? Like I think you mentioned instant articles. Like one thing we're acutely aware of when it comes to local publishers is that it is not a one-size-fits-all approach. We need to come with a menu, a suite of options that you can pick and choose from that is going to make most sense for you. Whether you're a local publisher who thinks a lot about video or live or text, we want to make sure we're serving you up options that are going to make sense for your newsroom. So thank you for the question, and I would say local publishers are core to everything that we think about, because for many of us, that's where journalism starts and ends. All journalism is ultimately local, and we feel very strongly about being supportive.
Okay, so let's take questions here. So, lady there, then the gentleman there, and then Bach and Ricardo. Yeah. So, yes. Oh, okay. Start first, and then you. You actually guys need to go to the mic just to see some sort of. Okay. You can just start. Okay. Oh, there is no mic. Oh, it's the mic. Okay.
Shall I give her?
You take it. Oh, all right. Thank you. I really just had 2 quick points. My name is Paula Slee, I'm from RT, and thank you to Sophie for mentioning the fact-checking tool we have on our site. We really appreciate the work that you do, and my point, it's maybe more a point than a question, is that at the moment there's no Russian organizations that are engaged in the fact-checking community, and we really would like to be. We do take it seriously, so I put it out there as an offer. My question to the lady from Facebook, sorry, I can't pronounce your name. One of the problems we have is with Facebook Live. Is there the opportunity to perhaps have a 10-second delay so that we can protect our community from any kind of material that could be harmful for them to see? Thank you.
Okay. So then, okay.
Yes, Mira Milosevic from Global Forum for Media Development. Thank you for your contributions. It's interesting that we haven't mentioned the economic model for news, and that's behind our ability to produce high-quality news content. And it seems to me that the fake news or false news is just the tip of the iceberg of something that has been happening over the last 20 years as an economic model for digital content, and that's valuing clickbaits or clicks over really reading, consuming, and engaging with quality content. So the question is, what do we know about your core business, not the journalism project, but your core algorithm in terms of pushing, promoting, and linking to advertising the content? Is it still based on clicks, likes? Is it still based on not looking at what people really consume? I am positive, and I know that today we are able to measure really well how much of the article has been read. I'm not talking about points of view, diversity, I'm talking about the value. And until we pair content that has been consumed from the top to the bottom, that has created a really strong engagement of the audiences, and that's the content that's usually high-quality content. Until we pair that with economic value, and until we pair that with advertisement, we're not going to get anywhere. I'm sorry for being long, but I think it's a really important point.
Okay, so then the gentleman, blonde gentleman, and then Ricardo. Or Ricardo, you start first, and then you pass the mic to the... Sorry, I can't really see you guys, so...
Thank you very much. It was, I really appreciate your comments coming from you, but I have a question. Maybe we're not understanding the whole, well, not industry, but the whole phases of what we're talking about. What about opinion? Opinion is in the core. Opinion that it's you know, social commentary, political commentary, that it's especially protected under international law. Where are you going to draw the line? I mean, it's easier to do, you know, to categorize something as fake news when it's part of I don't know, a reportage, for example. But what about people that are actually exercising the right to their opinions? And under international law, if you're not promoting hate or you're not inciting, well, so on and so forth, you actually have the right to have deranged and delusional opinions. And I want you to if it's possible, to comment on this, because the problem is that if a censorship, prior censorship or whatever, you know, at some point of this kind of opinions, wouldn't you say that you will be creating an underground discussion of things that should be out in the open to be confronted? I mean, to be confronted, to be debunked. So, I mean, could you comment on that part? And also, I'm really, I was shocked to hear about the person from Facebook about, you know, putting adjectives about the public debate taking place in your platform. I mean, you were talking about, for example, polarization. What do you mean by that? Because, I mean, you know, a lot of dictators use that kind of wording when they actually are witnessing what is called, you know, a vibrant public debate.
Okay, so thank you. That
opinions.
Was, several questions. Can you pass the mic to Mr. Trump?
Thank you.
I suppose I'm very good looking then, no? All right, so I'm Margianta. I'm an international relations graduate from Paramanda University, Jakarta. So I would like to ask, perhaps also pointing out the insecurity between us, that we are now living in a, are we now living in the right direction? We are going to be a more progressive democratic society, or are we few steps away from a dystopian Orwellian world? Because in social media, it was built under common good, built under hope for civic virtues like empathy, honesty, and truth. But we didn't know that there were also demagogues, pathological liars who also tend to use it in other way. So the problem occurs when the people in power are using the social media. And not only from the government, but also from the private sectors who also own the social media themselves. So, like for instance, anti-critics politicians with fake, who are pointing out fake news, like this person, and then self-serving civic vice, like a racist, xenophobic, sexist remarks, and also some social media corporations, I'm sorry, that allegedly also have issues with our privacy, personal information for advertisement. So basically my question is like, how do we handle this fingertips propaganda? How do we handle this that prevent further tension, social conflicts in the society? So it divides the question into two parts. First, what can we do as the government, because we don't want too much risky intervention from social media corporations, profit-based social media corporations who has issues about taking care of our privacy, and as the civil society, what can we do? Because we don't want government to put too much strict limits, then we don't want a big brother or in an Orwellian way that also endangers the freedom of media and social media users. Like in Indonesia, we have also the troublesome, often misused electronic information and transaction regulations, which also sometimes being criminalized. Some activists also being criminalized for their freedom of expression. Okay, what can we do in this post-truth era? Thank you.
Thank you.
Because we have been actually talking about this for last 1 hour. So I'm kind of puzzled by your question, to be honest, but thank you for raising it. Back at the last question, and then we'll go.
Hi, Baka Janap. I work at Columbia Global Freedom of Expression. Quick question. How do you define success in this conversation? And the reason I'm asking this is because, at least in the US, you see that a lot of fake news stories were generated out of public discussions, out of forum discussions, and didn't come from any media websites. So I'm wondering if this discussion is just a way to protect the media. Are we just trying to separate, media generate fake news stories from anything else? And once we have some trust in the media again, okay, we're fine with fake information being disseminated by private persons? Or is there something beyond that?
Okay, so we had 3 questions to Onye from Facebook. I see the Facebook is really being hammered here. Sorry about that. So one was about the delaying of the video. Then there was a question about the algorithm. And then where do you draw lines between fake opinions or like biased opinions and fake news? And are you censoring the opinions? And then we had a question about dystopian future and about whether we are like doomed, which obviously we are. And yes, that's the conclusion. And then what is the success of the debate? So I first pass to Onye and then to the others.
Okay, great. So on the first question about live and that idea of a 10-second delay, that is something like some of the team are here from Facebook Journalism Project today. When we go into newsrooms, this is a question that has come up. I would say on live, when we launched that product a year ago, it was a good product. It is now a great product because it has gotten better day by day because the feedback from journalists and editors and questions like that. That is definitely one we did take back to our product team and I believe is under review. I think the question you're trying to get at is ultimately if maybe something graphic happens or something maybe that you have ethical concerns about maybe as a journalist or an editor that you can put a delay or maybe some kind of graphic overlay. And I know this is what broadcasters have been asking for, is there maybe some kind of warning that you could put on very quickly just to say to your audience, we're taking 10, 20 seconds to check this out. So I will just say on that, it's something that has come up with publishers and journalists. We have taken it into our product team. And I would say when we do it, or if in fact it's already being done and I am not up to speed on this, our Facebook Journalism Project page, I encourage you, please go and follow it. We also have a private group that we operate for editors and journalists that we update every single day. It's the Facebook partnerships and operations teams and product teams. So when we're doing features updates and things like that, we go in there. So for any of you in Facebook later on today, go into search, hit news, media and publishing. Just make sure in your biography you're really clear that you're a journalist and editor, and that is the type of place where we can give you updates and things like that around live. On the second question on the newsfeed principles, and I think you were tying it, ultimately, can you monetize content? Is there a way to build sustainability? I think on the first question about how newsfeed works, our commitment is to be much more transparent around the values and principles and any changes, frankly, that come to the newsfeed. So I encourage you, we have a newsfeed FYI blog. If you simply Google Facebook newsfeed FYI, that's where you will see us being really transparent when changes come. When those changes come, sometimes it is on foot of rigorous research and feedback from our community. It tends to be, we have a quality feed team. day in, day out, we're doing surveys. When they click and read something, we're asking them, was this useful? Did this help inform you? So often those changes are on foot of what the community is telling us that's most useful to them. And as I mentioned earlier, in terms of the newsfeed values, yes, it's friends and family first, but what do friends and family very often talk about? It is news content and information that is going to help them have informed conversations amongst their family. So I hope that has addressed the first piece of the question. I have a nodding, shaking head. If it's not, I will seek you out after this. Thank you. And I thought maybe the second part of your question was around monetization and how journalists and newsrooms can build some sustainable revenue on Facebook, and that is a deep commitment of ours. It is enshrined in the Facebook Journalism Project that we want to work with the industry to figure out improved monetization options. Like right now, you can monetize through instant articles. We're doing a lot of testing around video monetization and what does it look like to have commercial breaks during the live or midstream advertisements during videos. So there's a lot that we're working on with the industry to figure out how can you build more revenue on our platform. If that hasn't answered the question, I will seek you out or seek me out afterwards. There was a question, what had I meant by polarization? I'll be really brief. What I had meant by that was that Facebook is this platform of 2 billion people. Never before have we been potentially exposed to such a diverse range of opinions and ideas and exchange of information. So what I meant by that is that, since the history of time, editors, producers on TV are often accused of, well, you're making editorial decisions and, are there your own biases? And this question sometimes comes up with Facebook of, is there polarization on Facebook because our subconscious bias is to surround ourselves with people that we agree with and find comfort in that. And my point that I was trying to get at is that we really want to make sure on our community that we're giving people a more complete picture, taking you sometimes outside maybe of your friends and family to a bigger and wider and more diverse community. And that's why I was talking about that idea of when you click in to read an article, you'll get maybe some suggested articles. When you read maybe a piece right now in France about the French elections, we're going to give you an array of different perspectives so you can see where do you line up. So that was the point I was trying to get at, is to give people a more complete picture of the content and news that is happening on platform. What else?
How do you distinguish between biased opinion and facts? So if I put somewhere that ISIS was brought by Americans, is this false news or is this opinion?
The thing again I want to be really clear on is that Facebook does not want to be the arbiters of truth. We want to obviously empower our community to flag content they believe is fake, they believe is spam, they believe is not trustworthy. And the worst of the worst hoax content, as I mentioned at the beginning, is going to third-party fact-checking organizations, not Facebook, because we are not journalists, we are not editors. That's what you guys do. And that is part of the partnership we're trying to build, is that for the worst of the worst hoax content in the US right now is to rely on third-party fact-checking organizations to do that. So we are not in the business of disseminating and deciding what is fact and what is opinion, but we are dealing with the worst of the worst false news content.
Okay, well, I sort of disagree with you that we have never been in the period where we have been having such a diverse opinions, because some argue that we are actually coming back to coming to the end of Gutenberg parentheses, and then we are going actually to the period before the print press was invented and where the media were controlling the stream of information, and we are going to be to the future is going to be medieval, not medieval, but going back basically to medieval ages. And that's actually a theory that is quite interesting, and I encourage you guys to check. But I want to actually close with this last question, which was put by Bach, about where we see the success in these debates and what actually are we talking about and what do we want to achieve when we are talking about tackling this problem. So I want to give each of our panelists maybe skip Facebook, because you have been already on the receiving end of a lot of questions. So what do you want to achieve with this debate and what we are actually ultimately trying to get?
Well, I'll repeat myself. In essence, I think we want to get an informed audience primarily, an audience that is educated and understands how they're consuming media. We want to have more responsible governments in terms of protecting freedom of the media and freedom of expression and not abusing the term fake news to clamp down on freedom of expression?
I would say that the first thing to remind that the legal response is not the right response to fake news, that privatization of censorship through tech giants is not also the solution, that we need to encourage media literacy, to empower media consumer to be educated to media pluralism, to checking the source, but also we need to promote a high quality journalism and to really help the journalist community to face this crisis.
Ya, masalah fake news adalah masalah kita bersama, dan oleh sebab itu kita semua harus sama berbuat bersama, mulai dari masyarakat, media, dan juga kelompok-kelompok sipil yang lain, termasuk juga pemerintah. Dan sekali lagi bahwa fake news ini akan bisa kita atasi kalau dalam konteks media adalah kalau media kekeh dan mau menjalankan prinsip-prinsip jurnalistik dan kode etis jurnalistik tanpa syarat, dan juga kemudian menyikapi perkembangan yang terjadi termasuk tantangan-tantangan yang muncul dari revolusi digital ini dengan kreatif, bukan dengan mengorbankan jurnalisme.
I promise to be brief. Yeah, I think for success, I'll finish where I started earlier. It's that, you know, from Facebook's perspective, that we will, you know, have cut off those financial ties between spam, spoof domains and our platform, that there will be less false news that is exposed to people to even share, so less false news available on our platform, that we will have worked with the industry on collaborative solutions, and not just solutions that will benefit Facebook, but frankly the entire news ecosystem that we deeply care about. And that we will have a community on and off Facebook that is informed, that is engaged, that are critical sharers and have their own skills to be their own arbiters of truth. Because, you know, I think the thing that sets apart the community today is that they are not just receivers of content. They are publishers, they are eyewitnesses, they are their own verifiers, they own their own debunkers. And what makes me really excited and hopeful sitting here today is the potential to empower our communities and users and public to actually help us with this entire solution and the work that we're trying to do collaboratively.
Yeah, thank you. And also, we haven't responded to gentleman in Mr. Trump's mask, but the solution, as I said already, is what was discussed in the panel, but also I encourage you to pick up the joint declarations, which, as I said, solves all your problems and gives you the list of things to do and don't do if you are addressing the fake news. But also from Article 19 perspective, what we want is ultimate, actually underlying issue here is how to achieve pluralism and diversity in the digital space. And how we achieve this in collaboration with, you know, stakeholders, but also how to prevent the government to get restrictions, how to prevent one source of media or one source of you know, information controllers, be it, you know, mainstream media or be it social media giants, to control the spread of information. And I don't think that we can achieve the objective of having less false news or fake news, and actually I think it will be quite Sisyphus struggle and impossible to achieve. But I think that even if we have, you know, more false and fake news, we will have to, if we have informed and equipped citizenry who is able to distrust and check and approach the information they consume with a critical perspective, that's actually a victory rather than less falsity and less lies, because those existed since the time immemorial. But unfortunately, we are coming to the end of our session, and this is very, you know, controlled environment. So I am seeing the signs from the organizers to finish imminently. So I want to thank our panelists for their really great contributions and for their perspectives. I also want to encourage you to pick up Article 19 publications, because I don't want to carry them back to London. So please do pick them up, and they deal with obviously not fake news, but the issue of of defamation, which is relevant with the issue of privacy. So I hope you pick them up and help me. And I also want to thank UNESCO for giving us opportunity to have this panel. And panelists are going to stay around. So if you want to talk to them privately, please do so. So thank you very much.